Hi, so tonight we're going to talk about chapter 12 and 13, which is the deaf community and low vision and blindness. So we want to give kind of an overview and not be so formal tonight and kind of hit the high points because we're trying to put two together. Excellent. So Alicia was saying that you noticed in our field with signing.
Well, I noticed about 20 years ago when I was having my own kids that like I would go to the kids bookstore, when there was a Barnes and Nobles or a Border or anything, and the kids books had like baby signs.
Yeah.
And so the world was starting to be exposed to like you could sign to your infant and they would start to say things like more or eat or drink or mommy or daddy. So I think like in general, like with baby Einstein came this phenomenon of signing. And so I think that was the first time I saw the world kind of moving in that direction. I had taken sign in college because it was the group I had worked with. I had this amazing student in Santa Ana at the deaf and hard of hearing school that they have in Santa Ana. And it really just, I had done so much in that community that I was like, oh, the world's kind of found this niche. And then I've only seen it explode, even to the part now. I was telling Professor, like, I think when the school started, my two oldest daughters take sign at their school as their second language. Yeah. So I was just blown away by that. And my girls proficiently sign. Like, I mean,
so now they can talk about you.
Oh, they talk about me all the time. Like, that's how I know they're doing this all the time.
I love it.
I can keep up. But my daughter was working. She works at the Irvine Park last weekend, and there was a grandma who brought her child. So this all came full circle. My daughter walked in last night. I was reading up on the chapter, and she comes in and she's like, "Oh, Mom, I forgot to tell you, I used my sign last week with an elder," which I found to be this woman who had hearing, who lost her hearing, then learned to sign.
Wow.
And taught her granddaughter, who they went to this, my daughter was putting her on the horse, and my daughter communicated with the grandmother, and the son came over and was blown away. I just saw the full circle of how the chapter talked about it. I know. So how they were saying, like if it's congenital versus the bigger population is the older adults. I found a lot of that information to be a little bit more interesting than the nuts and bolts of what this low incident thing is.
Right. So I mean, like, taking a step back, I tell people, like, if we live long enough, we are going to lose our hearing or our vision or both.
I'm already half there.
Right. What? And so here's the thing, like, I love that there's a language that can be, for people who are willing to do it, which I think is fantastic, because I think we all have people that we know who might be in denial about it. And then you hear the buzzing of the hearing aids or what, or I refuse, or no, I'm not losing my hearing. Like, so I love that there is a language, and I agree with the baby signing time. So I did put those videos in the module, like at the bottom. And I learned about the lady who started baby signing time. So yes, we had baby Einstein, and, kind of interestingly enough, baby Einstein's all this little tweaky stuff. Great for kids with visual sensory issues.
Yes.
We watched, after Thanksgiving meal, we watched old videos of Peyton. I was like, oh yeah. And so baby signing time kind of came out of that. So Rachel, she's a hearing woman. She had a deaf child. So she like dropped everything and she just went all in. And I think baby Einstein was bought by Disney. Was started by a mom, bought by Disney. And I think Rachel did something else too. So like a big company kind of bought her or whatever. So, and it's fantastic because yeah. So for Peyton, I mean, I tell people, I'm like, signing didn't make him hyperlexic, but the fact that he was kind of he knew about 50 signs by the age of 2.
Really?
Yeah. So he could do, and there were times, and even after that, we would still sign to try to, almost like, I don't mean to say that I was yelling at him across the room, but yeah, there's a point where you can kind of like get a child's, because again, with the ASL, it takes so much other communication pieces, like the nonverbal and things like that.
And facial.
A lot of facial expressions. Yeah.
And that is so, what they say, I would counteract that, but they say it's not common in the world of autism because they don't understand emotion. And
they're a little flat. They're a little flat.
Yeah. And so I would argue if they're smiling, that's not flat, but yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, kind of like you, like I learned, and by the way, I live by the deaf school. I live like 4 blocks from there.
Oh, in Santa Ana. That school's amazing. Cece, are you familiar with that school?
No, I'm not.
Oh, amazing. Just amazing.
It's actually not far from our campus.
No, it's not.
No, you would take like Newport all the way down the hill, and it's kind of like in like a little residential community right there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like close. It's, I mean, I live 4.1 miles away, and so it's probably about that. Yeah, and so, and they have, and I think I put it in the module too, that they have like a little video and they show the kids, and it's so sweet because again, yes, like you were saying, the low incidence disabilities, like, you know, low vision blindness, and then the deaf community, it's very rare. This takes almost such a deep level of training and commitment from as the professional. This, I mean, I have to tell you, so Peyton's 14. We've had one kid, he's been to I think 4 schools or 5 schools, one child with like a walking cane, so blind enough to use a walking cane in any of these gen ed or special ed communities. So they usually, even though we say placement is with the least restrictive environment, that may be a whole separate school, maybe least restrictive environment, because they need that level of environment. Yeah.
Well, and did you read? I also found this to be interesting. I don't know if you guys watched that Coda. I know it was part of one of the shows that we could, but the Deaf and Hard of Hearing book kind of alluded, or the chapter kind of alluded to, there are 3 different types of placements. Of course, you want to be as much included as possible, finding the least most restrictive. But this is the one community that wants to be segregated.
Yeah.
And in and of that is their freedom, their choice. And I thought that was so well calculated in that movie Coda, where the daughter and the parents only have friends that are deaf and hard of hearing. And the daughter who has hearing is trying to expose them to this whole other world. And they're like, no, we only understand people who understand us.
Right.
And I thought there's a security in that. Yes, that they want to be with other people like that. I found that the book alluded to that very well.
Yeah, and it's like, so that's why you hear us saying the deaf community, because now a person in the deaf community can label themselves differently. But I love that it is a community, and number one, they don't believe that they have a disability. They believe that other people are disabled and they're just fine, which is fine. Even in the Native American communities, they like, well, deafness, it's like, that's what the Great Spirit decided to give you. It's not a disability. It's just what you got.
And, you know, they celebrate it, and they've really done a great job of marketing. So my daughters at their school once a year have a deaf and hard of hearing day where they all have to wear earplugs, and they can't. So the kids that have taken sign can sign, but the kids that are in Spanish and French and Latin, they're like, so they're not hearing any, I mean, this probably is not like, they're not hearing their math, their science, because they're hard of hearing. They've marketed it that well. They have their own nights at Starbucks all throughout Orange County, where you can go and sit with these people, and they're ask us, talk to us, like engage with us, and they will tell you about their lives, their struggles, their jobs, their relationships, their children. They've done such a great job at really making it beautiful.
And it is a really, I love, there's a fierceness there. There's a fierceness there. And that it is a community. It has deep roots in our country. If you look in the book, it talks about how there's a huge deaf community in Martha's Vineyard, which is kind of like Connecticut, like way out there, almost like if you think pilgrimage stuff. Like there was this massive community in Martha's Vineyard, by the way, still there.
I learned that from the book. I was looking it up last night. I'm like, are they still there?
Yep, still there. And there was this thing where they thought it was, you could catch it. It was like you could catch deafness because there were so many people in the deaf community there, and you could catch it. And then they realized, oh, it's because we're intermarrying, and you know, there is a genetic component and things like that. But there is just like every group has its in-group and out-group striations. And so even inside the deaf community, you could like say, oh, well, I'm this deaf, or I'm this deaf, or you're not really deaf.
Right.
Like if you were in a car accident and you went deaf, oh, well, you're not that deaf. We're deaf from birth. And my parents are deaf. My siblings are deaf. My grandparents are deaf. So we're a deaf family. We are a deaf family. And then if you have deaf parents and then you're hearing, and you are CODA, so children of deaf adults. And so, but there's this piece where it's like, you're not deaf enough, but you're deaf enough, but you're not deaf enough. And then the whole controversy with the cochlear implants.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so there's this piece where I mean, you've seen hearing aids, right? But cochlear implants have a connect that has to be inside the skull. And so you're technically, and then there's a piece that actually goes into the cochlea, which is like this little, again, all those pictures are in the supportive pieces under the module. I have pictures, I have everything in there. And diagrams, everything, because I'm so fascinated. You could see like some chapters are like this one's like but there's this piece where as a parent, you have to decide to literally do brain surgery on your child. And it's only like 40% successful. So there's this thing where you, like, what if you're a deaf parent and your child's now asking you for a cochlear implant? Do you say no because our culture is this? Or what if you're a hearing parent and you have a deaf child who's now straddling both worlds? And are you making choices that are best for them or best for you? It's there's a lot of things to consider. And I think to me, the biggest heartbreak, I have worked in ABA with parents who agreed to do a cochlear implant and it did not work. So you do this huge thing and it just doesn't work. And you're like, there's like a lot of denial there. And then they're like, well, this first one didn't work, but maybe let's do the other one too. And you're like, it's a big cultural thing. Oy, it's hard. And so when I hear people saying, this is my community, and they're fierce about it, and they take pride and joy in it, and this is their deal. Yes, that is, you make those. I love having that identity. I don't care what group it is, like have that fierce identity, love it, be it, lean in all the way. And so it's really great because again, I feel like we're at the loss because they have a second language. They have a language that they can talk and we're lost. So
it's in Spanish. It's no different than French. I think
correct.
And I think for a lot of people, like I took Spanish. I don't speak foreign languages, although my husband does. Like I don't have the tongue. I truly believe that there are people who have a more advanced tongue than my basic English. And I could graduate. I got through Spanish, AP'd out in Spanish. I understand, but there are people who have that. And for that, the motoric part of it, of signing, I think gives them another modality. I think because I never struggled in sign. Right. So I think that's another opportunity. I love
it. When Peyton was about 6, we were at Disneyland, and him and I were signing, and we were waiting in line for the Aladdin show at California Adventure, right? The whole stage show. And we're like so with him, we would ask for not accommodations, but we need to be near our door. Because when this kid's done, he's going to bolt. We're just going to go. Like, we don't want to interrupt. So we would usually ask for like the ADA support. So him and I were like signing, we're kind of waiting in this little corral. And there's this maybe college students signing. He, of course, my son, he's like super outgoing, walks right up to them and he's like, do you sign? And they were like, eh, and like, so they start rattling off. And I was like, no, he doesn't. It's a little bit, right? And come to find out, they were just students at Cal State Northridge.
Oh, that has a huge program.
Huge program. And they said, we come on this day because on Sundays they provide deaf interpreters for the show. And I was like, well, first of all, why not every day? Mm-hmm. Right? Why not every day? And sure enough, there was 2 young people, maybe like, in their 20s and 30s, like in there, and they were signing, and it was 2 of them, so they could kind of rotate, the Aladdin and Jasmine pieces. And then we talked with them after the show because my son's like, and 2 things. One, and I said, I'm a teacher, like, I'm curious, how did you get into this? One of them said, my best friend growing up, like my neighbor best friend, was deaf. And so I just learned from him, and then I formalized my education. The other girl said, like I learned it in Girl Scouts and I was curious about it. So I just formalized my education. The girl was left-handed. And so it took me a second to realize she's signing with her left hand. Mm-hmm. And it's the same sign. It just, instead of
different,
just a dominant. Yeah. It just was like, oh, you're left-handed.
Yeah. One of my daughters is left-handed too. And when she would sign, I would have to switch. Like, I'm supposed to look here, but I'm looking here. Like,
it's just that. Just that. And it was really cool. And because, they're like, it's like I forgot what the sign is, like Cave of Wonders, but they added this part.
Oh,
So there was a lot of emotions, a lot of like nonverbals, and they would switch, and it was really kind of cool to see that it was not perfunctory. It was, oh, and by the way, on the stage show, there was a performer in a wheelchair
there
singing,
usually
like,
is.
yeah, and I was like,
always, yeah.
yeah. So, and it's really kind of cool to see this. And by the way, they do have different interpreters for the parade, and I put a video in the module as well. So they'll talk about, and it's really, really sweet. And I think, again, for kids to have a way to communicate their way with their family versus here one way and there the other, but like, again, I look at sign as almost, I mean, there's American Sign Language and different types of sign language, but technically isn't sign universal? I mean, not technically, but in a way, if we can't communicate, couldn't sign do that? So even in the module, I put another piece in there where there was a piece where, and it's a Samsung commercial, but there's a young man in this village, and I want to say like Turkey, and they taught kind of these actors kind of around his little village, the coffee guy and the orange monger and like the taxi driver, how to sign for like one day just to get him around the town. And it was really sweet because, but at the end they were like, oh, well, Samsung has this feature where you can like dial in and somebody will sign to you like in a video, whatever. It's kind of like an interpretation service. But it was really sweet because the guy's going through his day and like he bumps into somebody, and the lady's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, he says to his sister, do you know her? Like, how come all these people are signing? And then of course at the end, the man's like crying. He's like, all you people did this for me? He's like, yeah. They're like, yeah. Like, could you imagine going through your whole world and like maybe not hearing anything? And when you said that piece with the earplugs, I actually used to do that in class. As one of the discussion boards or one of the activities, I would be like, okay, so here you go. I would have like a basket of earplugs, glasses, like a light scarf, like you just, while you're in class, I want you to wear it. And so like for like an hour or two or whatever. And the first thing everybody would say was like, I didn't realize that it was blocking my view or whatever, this or that. But second thing they said was something else kind of picked up. Like my eyes were kind of like this, but like my hearing kind of, or my ears were caught and my eyes, or I could hear more feet walking instead of like the words. So our bodies are pretty magical. And so giving us options on how to communicate is really, really the bottom line. So I really do enjoy the deaf community. I would love to be more involved one of these days. But yeah, I have to tell you, so that did help me in ABA. Just being a fan and carrying it through and starting in Girl Scouts. I never took a class, but I can work with little teeny tiny kids, right? Because they don't know a whole bunch. But I would say that would be my specialty, that in between language. So I've worked with children who were this one child I work with. He was Spanish speaking but learning English, and so I was doing ABA with him. It's kind of in Spanish and English going back and forth. But his mom and her partner were deaf.
Okay.
And didn't speak English.
So they signed
in Spanish. And I was like, oh, geez. So some of the signs were universal. Some of the signs, so I was like, my brain is going to implode. I was using like 3 languages in one session. I was like, oh my God. But it was great though, because that boy, he was like, oh, you can talk with my mom and you can talk with me. And I was like, oh, I wonder if this child has ever experienced someone to be able to, and I was terrible talking with the moms, but it was like, and he was like, oh, wow. Like nobody can talk with me. Like, just felt like he was getting disservice. Like, and then helping children. What I really love is getting that functional communication for children who need like the proloquo, and then learning like between, like when you see a child connect more and a button that says more, and they like, oh, like you see it. Or like I had this one child who at the age of 2 he had a brain tumor and developed drop seizures, like 150, 200 drop seizures a day at 2 years old. And he lost his ability to talk. He wasn't babbling. He wasn't pointing. So we had to teach him sign language. And the day that he learned mama and then connected it to mama, I mean, I'll never forget that. She was like, I never thought he would ever call me, ever basically say my name again. Like I would never hear his voice. And he didn't mouth it. He didn't make a sound, but he was able to do it. All we did was reinforce with a hug. Took about 10, 12 trials. And then he would, and then we let him play. And then and then she was like, oh my God, and so it's a really lovely thing to have this tool that can help kind of be a mid piece. And so I look at the deaf community as very, very strong and powerful and magical. And the fact that they have empowered themselves, they are not lesser. They have their own way, and that's their way. It's not our way and their way. It's just, again, we said chapter 1, what is normal? That is normal. And I really, really appreciate that. So again, the chapter's not that hard, but just click through those videos, because I collected a ton of videos, especially when it came to some of the advocacy that the deaf community has done. I have old 1980, like grainy films from them protesting at Gallaudet.
Oh.
Yeah, in there, in the module. So I tell people, you know what? Deaf people can yell. You don't believe me? Like a crowd of deaf people. I mean, so basically, in a nutshell, they were looking for a new president, and they had hired a president who wasn't deaf or couldn't sign. And they were like, well, how can you be the president of our college if you don't represent us? And they're like, and the lady got really defensive. She's like, well, I got hired, the board hired me, and they did a protest, a sit-in, a walkout. They did all this stuff. It only took like 10 days, but they got all their demands met, which was like, no, you're stepping down. No, we need somebody who is deaf or from the deaf community. Nobody's getting into trouble for what we did. They got all their needs met, right? And then they chose a professor or an administrator who was he was deaf or in the deaf community, or it was maybe he had a family member who was deaf, but he was like entrenched in the community, and he was able to sign. And so they were like, we can't could you imagine if we had like an all women's college and there was a male president? I'm sure there has one. But I mean, there's this piece where you're like, wait a minute. It's like, could you imagine like Hispanic universities, and this person's like, well, I don't speak Spanish, but I can be the president. It's no big deal. So that was a big deal. I remember that. I was in high school when that was going down. Wow. And yeah, if you look at the grainy videos, you see all the acid wash jeans and whatnot, but people signing and just like, and watching watching how different people sign differently. Older people, younger people when they're really like fired up and signing, and I love watching it and trying to decipher in my brain. And people can mumble when they sign. People have accents when they sign. It's fantastic. There's regional differences. I did put as one of the resources in there, ASL University or LifePrint. That's huge. I love LifePrint. It's run by a professor who is deaf, and he has in there 30-minute college courses. Yeah. So, and in a huge library down the side. So if you want to look up zebra, which is striped horse, right? Or things like adopted.
Picked up.
Yeah. Or yeah, right. Or the sign for autism. I'm not sure if it's in there, but autism is interesting because it's an adaptive sign. So autism is usually this in a cup. So autism like that. But if it's like they're nonverbal, you would go like this.
So they
right. Yeah. So it's a little bit more adapted. Sometimes it identifies. And, and ASL does kind of borrow on things like Hanukkah is African, Jewish, like African
candles,
something like that. Oh yeah, menorah is like candles, and then like No, Sephardic is like African, like it's like, what are you guys doing? And they put science together, or in there in Life Print, he'll talk about, if you want to say party, it's usually this. But if you want to say partay, like he'll kind of give you the, and there's like people who like, so there's like a little bit of a thread, like a Reddit thread, almost like, well, when, I'm from Connecticut, we sign it this way, and things like that. So it's really kind of, it's got all the subtlety and nuance that every language has. And I really, really do love it. Even babies learning sign will sign in their sleep. Yeah. So
I have a question real quick.
yes.
When we talked about autism, how like some might say, I have autism or I'm autistic. When talking about people who are deaf or like hard of hearing, do they prefer not first person language or the one after that?
This is how I understand it. Typically, you would say a member of the deaf community. If they want to say something else, they may say something else. I usually do this. Oh, you sign. I don't say, oh, you're deaf. like, oh, you sign like that. Right. And even at Peyton's school, that's for autism and related disorders, like for his high school, they are doing sign language there as a language, even there. Yeah. And they have it matriculated through Irvine Valley College, but it is one of Peyton's old one-on-ones. She went and got her CBEST because she is a certified deaf interpreter. She was for the fairgrounds. And so she's doing this, but they like just put it together, and she's like teaching classes like Irvine Valley classes.
Wow.
Yeah. And so even students with autism can learn sign language. They're very rote about it. They're very meticulous about it, but the facial expressions have to come later. So, but yeah, they're learning. And so again, it has all this subtle and nuance, but it also has this huge, almost like advocacy piece, this like political piece to it, which you're just like, yeah. And so I'm a big fan. So again, I tell people like, I have a little toe in the water, but one of these days. So I'm hoping Peyton will take that because he loves the teacher. And so I said, well, if you take it, I'll take it, because SEC has a good program. We have a program for ESL. And I think I may be wrong, but I think it's the chair and his wife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so he's like full-time and she's like part-time. Yeah.
That's great.
But that's like, excuse me, Cece, that was a great question about the person first language. The reason I put it in that autism chapter is that people do sometimes take words and make them their own. And again, that came up from a student who was like, I don't like saying I'm a person with mental illness. And she's like, I am bipolar as hell, and so I don't want somebody to like label that for me. I like that, I take that as a thing. It's like saying, like in the past, like the word queer was bad. And now it's like, no, I'm super queer. And people have empowered that. And so same thing with the deaf community. They don't say, some people will say, yes, I'm a member of the deaf community. And some people are like, no, I'm deaf. Deal. So let them guide you. I always tell that. I don't ever ask about their disability. Just connect to them like a human being. And even if you don't sign and you don't know how to connect to them, you can say hi. A lot of times they lip read, and you can say, how can I help you? That's it. I mean, even just going like that, how can I help you? The nonverbals that come with that is enough for them to know that you're at least an ally. And so I think I do have a video in there that says like, how do you help a deaf person if you don't sign? And somebody just said, be willing to be there and try. Because sometimes you guys can come to this piece. And there was another test in there that was, I don't know, it was a website that said like, more sign than you'd think. And it was something about like two people were signing, and then it asked you at the end, what are they talking about? Most people get about 30% of the conversation. Yeah. So don't ever feel intimidated, and don't feel like you have to have the correct label for the person. It's like nobody walks up to me and say, so how should I refer to you? A woman of a certain age, or like, oh, I'm just a person, right? You just like, I'm just a person. I identify as a Californian. I tell people I am not white. I'm like pink or green, depending on the season. Like summer, super pink, winter, super green. Like you could see all my little green lines in here, like in the winter. So it's like, nah, not exactly white, pink or green. Yeah. And my chair, the department, she's like, we need more women of color, we need more people of color, we need more diversity in early childhood. She's like, I had 3 white women like apply for your job, and you're the one with the mixed kids. So I was I said, so I'm an ally. She's like, kind of. That's all you got. That's all you got. So, okay, good. So I think that was a nice overview of the deaf community. Now, low vision and blindness. Oh, that's another one. Very low incidence. When a child, we will identify very early if the child within the first year to 3, sometimes, yeah, as children are getting their well baby checks, you know that either it's the vision is what it is or it's declining. And sometimes there's like some stories that I added in there that, sometimes you can get a tumor in the eyeball, has to be removed. And then a lot of different things. So again, specialized specialized teaching, very rare, but there are schools for the blind. And again, this one near our campus is actually really well done.
Very good.
And it's right behind a school. It used to be a church, and it's right behind a school. And Peyton almost went to Gwen Foss. He almost went to that school. I mean, we were like in walking distance. But we ended up not going. That was the SDC program at the time. And we were like, nah, he's not ready. But I was like, oh, there it is. I heard about it. And they do like little walkathons and whatnot. But inside there, so when he was younger, what I understood was that it was only for deaf children. And if there's any other related disorder, they wouldn't take them. And now it's open for, I'm sorry, I said deaf children. I mean, blind children. Now it's open for children who are blind and have other things.
Correct.
Like wheelchair, crutches, autism, things like that, ADHD. I mean,
the school's amazing. Have you been on campus?
I have not been. I mean, next to it.
Yeah, it's I many years ago applied for another, and it the way that the campus is set up, that you feel everything. The you know how like on the when kids line up at a school, there's like a yellow line or a red line.
Mm-hmm.
These lines were huge and white, and they bumped up on the ground, almost like those things that you drive over.
Yeah.
So they were bumped up on the ground. There were so many accommodations that I just didn't even think about. All the door handles were much lower. I noticed that right away. So much lower.
And the sign it was closer to the door handle. So a child could walk up and touch the wall. And it wasn't like up here. It was like their height. Right. And they could say like, no, this isn't the right room, or this is the right room. And then they could reach for the door handle.
Yeah. It was, the accommodations were just mind blowing to me. Like everything. I was taken back. I just wanted to sit there and stare at all of it. Like it was nice. It was well done. Like the park had the playground that the kids play. It has like a physical little, like a lip, but not like a lip that you just fall over. Like I would just tip on over. Right. It was like over your knee. So like the kids knew to kind of just like guide it, like almost like a dog, like how they guide along the wall. Yeah. You could see them. They would move their bodies up to like just shimmy around to know where they were playing ball. They were just playing ball. And how they moved was just, I just thought,
one of the other challenges that I would give students was do one of your daily habits with your eyes closed. Brush your teeth
or something.
Take a shower. Make a cup of coffee. Just with your eyes closed. The other thing, the one with the hearing was like hearing, like stuff it for an hour and see how you do. And the other one was like just brush your teeth with your eyes closed. Take a shower with your eyes closed. Try to fold your laundry with your eyes closed. Try to organize your purse with your eyes closed. Like just little things like that. Just try to do the dishes with your eyes closed. Try it for 5 minutes and see how you do. It's like you said, Alicia, there's like these accommodations that you don't even realize that we
I mean, and this had been in a world, I mean, I've only been in the world of special education my entire life. Like I've been around these, like I'm yet to be surprised by something. And I remember walking on that campus, mind you, it was a long time ago, but I was like, wow, this is just astonishing. For every, like, this would have been a great Girl Scout place to go so that they could see what it takes. And the other thing that was so astounding to me about the blind children's was the level of impairment is almost eye striking to a lot of people. I think because they walk different, they don't walk different, but they've learned to maneuver their body different.
Right.
Because they need safe to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the deaf and hard of hearing. I'm not speaking of in the community. I'm speaking of me watching them. It is quite different to see. And so I think that when they're out in the community, it's there's more fear behind it than the deaf and hard of hearing. I think that they're just more visually impairing.
Right.
Than the deaf and hard of hearing.
I remember learning from the book that maybe it was this book, I think it's this book, but maybe the version before, they said that young children with vision challenges are less likely to get up and cross a room for a toy or a friend. Everything is quasi dangerous.
Right.
So you're going to have a child who, like, where a typical learner is going to like, even like a 6-month-old or 9-month-old is going to be like, okay, well, I want to reach out and crawl and I want to look at that, or I want to engage with that, or I see something over there that I want. They don't see it, so they don't want it, so they don't move. So there's a lot of nothing happening because they don't know what to do. So yes, navigating a universe when your eyes don't work is using your hands and your feet and your body and your elbows. There's just this thing. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. They do have a video that I added that it's in there, and it says like welcome to whatever, and it shows all the different things and all the different tools and the children climbing up, like how they climb, even like a little, it looks like a ramp, that just like almost like a rainbow bridge, like a ramp or whatever, and it has different pieces on it so they know that they're going straight or if they're going this way. Like, it's pretty amazing the things that we kind of take for granted, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And again, if we get older and we lose our eyesight, then what? Do we go back to that school? No. We have lots of different things that we have to figure out, as we navigate getting older. But these kids have this opportunity to have, and I think Chapman has, because again, being a teacher of these very specialized children takes very specialized education. So I believe Chapman has their placement. They do their practicum there. And so, sometimes, yeah. And so it's a specialty. It's not just a teacher who works in special ed or has your add-on credentials or whatever. It's like, it's another master's. It's a lot.
I can tell you, I had a master's and I was ill-equipped. Like I was like, that's what I'm saying. Like where I was even visually taken back by, I was just like, wow. And then the other thing that was astounding to me was there's not one of them like walking down the street with a cane. There's a lot of them. And so you're trying to keep a lot of kids safe. It's overwhelming. It was a bit overwhelming, not in a bad way. I mean, I got the job. It was great, but it was weird. And then now that you say that, that's so funny because in my field in early intervention, so vision is a huge thing. Like just what you said, whenever I see a gate off or they're not crossing midline, or they're moving in a weird pattern, or they're turning, like a lot of autistic, like a lot of parents will always say they look outside their left, or they always look up like this,
they'll do this.
And you're like, okay, easiest way to default is to get the vision checked. But that's so hard to do in the pediatric population. Just to go and get your vision checked, there's not, there isn't, the response isn't enough for them to keep going. You really have to really get to that really high specialist. And so constantly delving in the vision world I live in, but to have seen it 15 years later, these people have really walked a road that is not walked by many. It is really challenging.
So again, you have clues, because there's not like a 2-year-old on the planet goes, I think I have poor vision. No, you see all the other clues that you're like,
Right.
and again, it's almost like troubleshooting anything, right? You want to isolate a variable. First it's eyes and ears, right? And again, we talked about that as a part of the IEP, the assessment process. But what if this is the pre? You got to get it in there. And I mean, I have to say, I was lucky that way that, you know, Peyton was on Healthy Families, and they checked us out because, again, preemies have a higher chance of having retinopathy of prematurity. So again, if they're on oxygen and the oxygen saturation is high, so Peyton was on oxygen for a day, one whole day, 24 hours, but the saturation oxygen was the room that oxygen that we breathe in a room. You know, we don't breathe 100% oxygen, right? We breathe like 48% out of it. You know, there's like all kinds of stuff in the air, right? But when they so basically when a child hasn't really finished forming, it's all the detail work in a child is usually frontal lobe that hasn't finished developing, all the extremities, all the little, you know, capillaries and all the pieces. So when they're in the isolette and they give them extra oxygen, the thing is that oxygen helps them grow, but because the capillaries are the smallest in the eyeballs, it almost like bursts them in a way. So you'll see a lot of kids that you're working with who may have been preemies, glasses, like 1-year-olds, glasses.
This.
Yeah.
Thick
Yeah.
as can be.
Yeah. And the ones that are like with the strap, like, you know, you're like, oh, that was a preemie.
And they wear them and they are heavier than a brick, but you take them off and they're
got
like
nothing.
lost sheep. So
They
they
got nothing.
like, it's the most astounding thing to see.
It's easier to put glasses on them than it is to get it on a teenager for the first time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
And so it's really interesting because like I'm see, you can see it a mile away, like that was definitely a preview. Like their glasses or their gator, they're just tiny. They have the little Minnie Mouse voice. I call it, they just have like a little baby voice, like forever. And like, oh, that was a preemie. I tell people, Peyton had oxygen. He had oxygen for a day and it was room. So he didn't have a high concentrated level of oxygen. And he was kicking his pulse ox off his foot within the week. I was like, typical already. But there's a lot of different things. I mean, I dated a guy in college who had a head injury and his retinas were detaching. So he had this piece where he was getting the tunnel vision.
Like smaller vision. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's most likely 100% blind now. Yeah. And it was like, he was like running on a playground and hit the tetherball pole where the crank was, just hit it so hard. And it was like this detachment over like 10, 20, 30 years. Let's see, 20 years. Yeah. So it was this thing. And I worked with a kid with autism who would hit his head so hard, he detached his retinas. Yeah. So eye issues, again, kids can be born with it. They can acquire it. It could be genetic. It could be a head injury. It could be all kinds of different things. But again,
also too, age. Like I hate to tell you this, DC, but after 40, like what they tell you about vision is true. So you will be looking at something and you're like, what?
We call it playing trombone.
It's horrible. It's horrible. And then you'll hand something to your spouse and you'll be like, what's going on? And they can't see it. So now you're mad because nobody can read.
I just have to tell you, so my husband at the age of 50, he got cataracts.
Oh my gosh.
He had double cataract surgery at the age of 50 before his mother did. Now his dad passed away about 30 years ago. So we don't know if that was genetic on his side, but I have to tell you, it took him to Kaiser, you know, and he has 2 plastic lenses with a serial number in there. And we have a card. It's just crazy. So we can identify his cadaver if we need that, right? If that makes it. But I'm telling you, if he was the youngest one in the room, and it was the weirdest thing. And then a couple of years later, his mom had to go do it too. But, and so, it's this piece where your lens just gets cloudy. And it was weird because he was like rubbing his eyes and I was like, oh, it's probably allergies or you have a piece of dander or whatever. He's like, no, it's getting worse. And so, sure enough. Yeah. And even the doctor was like examining him and comes back, goes, how old are you? He's like, I'm like 50 or whatever. She's like, okay, well, then this is genetic. So again, there's a lot of things that can be done. But again, we don't typically see cataracts at little kids, but there are eye surgeries that can be done and some can't be done. But technology is changing all the time. There's a whole piece in there. I put videos in on color blindness. There are glasses that help adjust for color blindness. So people who are colorblind can now see color. Even put a video in there as maybe like Oprah or something, where it was like a guy there was something about glasses they put on, but it also created something to create so he could actually see. It was really odd. It's something weird and new and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of technology that's helping kids. But again, I tried to impress upon our students, like, this is almost like the group that we could be a part of at some point. The low vision and the low vision and low hearing, we could actually be, I mean, we look at this book of like all these intros to disability. I'm like, this is kind of the section where this isn't a other group of we kind of are heading. I just tell people, how are your grandparents with their hearing and their vision? That's it. And their hair. Like, do we have hair? Do we have eyes? Like, that's kind of where we're heading, right? Right. And
my
then
grandpa, he has a cochlear or implant, right? A cochlear implant, and I know sometimes he turns it off.
oh yeah,
Like when he doesn't want to hear us.
I'm out. I don't want to hear what you have to say.
I worked with an 8-year-old who had a cochlear, and he liked to sit with me on one side because he would just kick it off. And I would have to like reach around and like put it back on, because I know you could just see he'd be all boom. And I was like, oh no. And the coolest thing I put in the module too, there's like companies who make bling for your cochlear. First of all, they do them in different skin tones now, which is lovely. So you don't have to have like this, super light pale one. You can choose your skin tone now. And then they also have ones that the little connect back here. You can put, it's almost like a pop socket for your phone. You can like pop socket like Spider-Man on there or whatever you want. Or like little bling or flowers or I saw one at Disneyland when the girl had it was pink, and then she had like a little Tinkerbell on there. And I was like, oh, that's so cool, right? And so there's a lot of things that we can do to help children. But again, like Professor Fernandez said, we have to identify those things around it, because again, children don't have the language or the acuity to say, I'm struggling with my low vision. Like, they don't. But again, those clues that until you've seen a child not interact with a toy or a person who's like 3 or 5 feet away, you're like, interesting. Like, there's these little clues. And that's what I tell people, if it's in the back of your head or if it's been placed on your heart, that means that there's a follow-up. You need to like, just ask a couple more questions or observe just a little bit more, see what the parents have to say. Have you noticed, what do you notice at home? Things like that. So, and again, a child could have a vision check or a hearing check at age of 1, but by the age of 2, it's changed. Right. So always keep up on the well baby situation. Always keep on the well babies. We're not doctors. We're just like, hey, just keep up with the doctors, and sometimes, like you said earlier, Alicia, that you have to really push, you have to really advocate, because there's not a doctor on the planet who's like, oh yeah, let's just do extra ear screenings. Let's do extra eye screenings. Like, they'll do the basic ones. And if they're not sure, they'll make you come back. But yeah.
And that it's like I will tell you, in the years that I've been practicing, the hardest fights have been either with vision and hearing. It seems like it would be the easiest, like, versus a child coming that is on the spectrum, that's the relationship with the parent. But when you get a child and something is off a lot with the hearing, and they come in and their sounds are distorted, and they go and they get the hearing test and it comes back normal, and you're like, it's not normal. I don't know. No. It's not normal. So then the families just start going from an audiologist to get these different tests to different speed. It's like it is such a fight for both the vision and the hearing. And a lot of it is that our population, first of all, if they've been deprived of a sensory modality like hearing and seeing, their ability to functionally communicate to you, I can't hear right, is gone. And so, I can't see this, is gone. So the doctors are expecting some kind of reciprocity that isn't coming from the patient. It's coming from the parent. That's problem number one. And oftentimes they don't validate the parent to say how that's applicable.
It's easier to tell the parent they're being hysterical than it is to actually go down the rabbit hole.
They're fine. Just put them in therapy. They're fine. And then they've been in therapy for 6 months and they've made zero progress. Meanwhile, they're
flu.
Right. They're more advanced in their rigidity. They're more advanced in their stereopathy. They're just more advanced. And when you can get in there, speaking from an ABA, and you start to like pull things apart, you're like, this is not traditional autism. So I think that is, I was doing a lot of research on the deaf and hard of hearing and autism, and oftentimes they get misdiagnosed. That community, they're so introverted, they're so because they've lost the modality of hearing, they've separated themselves. And so then they get diagnosed with autism, and they were never autistic. They were not hearing you. And so we're 5 years in with no hearing, with no signing, no language. And we've been treating them for, I don't know, functional communication. All we got to do is give them a language. Like it's the doctors, it's been a struggle, I think.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because, again, we as adults, we should know more. We've been on the planet longer. We have more education. We have more training. But then there's these pieces where you come up with these roadblocks, and then it's hard. There are limits to everything. And then also I can tell you the piece of receptive communication delays. We go through this back and forth at my house. I mean, Peyton hasn't been exactly diagnosed with receptive, like a receptive delay, but besides the fact that he's
auditory processing.
Yes, I'm sorry, auditory processing. So like and I tell people, yes, he's a teenager who goes, what? But we've had this forever, right? And my husband's like,
so wait, so Cece, do you know what an auditory processing is?
No.
Okay. They talked about it just briefly in the chapter. Yeah.
Briefly. Okay. So imagine me talking just like this, and this information is coming to you, but for you, it just takes an extra second or 2 or 5. It just,
and sometimes your sounds get distorted. So like might have been what, or were.
Yeah.
So it changes the meaning of the sentence.
It's a little like dyslexia for the ears, a little bit. And then they're putting it, you can see it sometimes when the kids, their eyes are dancing, when they're like, okay, I heard what you said, but I'm trying to make sense of it. Right. They're doing this like, what thing? So Peyton has a little bit of that where he's like, but there's a piece where like, I know he has autism and he doesn't really understand facial expressions and social cueing and nonverbals and things like that. So there's this piece where he's putting words and how I've communicated it and read the room and this whole piece, he's trying to put it all together. So it takes him a minute, maybe like 30 seconds to a minute. And he's like, what? And then even in that minute where he's interpreting what you said, he's also gotten distracted because there's something else that he saw, he smelled, he's hungry, and there's a squirrel, literally, right? So my husband's like, no, I think he's got a hearing problem. I'm like, no. Because all we have to do is whisper, hey, did you bring those chocolate chip cookies home? And he's like, on it, right? So there's this piece where it's like, which one is it? So here's the thing. So when you're trying to figure out the autism and the auditory issue, it's like, you have to figure out like, what is it, this piece? Is it that piece? And it's really hard to separate those pieces because it could be both of those. Right. So
they do use, and I did like how the chapter spoke about it, like to just to amplify yourself. A lot of teachers will have an amplification system in the classroom to just bring out your voice, or to use it at certain times versus other times. And that there's even like a receptive part of it where students who are struggling with auditory processing can put it like almost like you know how we put our
I've had actually in the college classroom where I wear it almost like, you know, like if I was going to be on a talk show, you have a microphone and you wear a pack, and that person has it either in their ear or right next to them. And so I could see during like free play time or outside time where that would be very important. And yes, there's diagrams in the chapter and whatnot. And so it was interesting though. I could tell you in the college classroom, I would have them break into groups, and she's like, I can't understand them, but I can understand you. So I would have to make sure that it was me, her, and another student as a group. So it was really kind of, and then I had to be, if I was close enough to her, there'd be feedback. So I had to like turn it down. So there's a lot of little things, but all these things are there to help, but at the same time, you got to figure out what that sweet spot is. It's really
it's
hard.
so hard, and the road less traveled to get there,
Yeah.
and the patience and
Yeah.
I mean, you did it. How many teachers would do that? How many
Oh.
students would knock on a teacher's door and say, I'm struggling with this?
It was awkward, and she ended up dropping.
See?
So I'm like, did I do it wrong? Did I not support her? Did I like, and I think, I mean, I can't guess, but I know she was really, hers was, she was in a car accident.
Mhm.
She was in a car accident. And so that was interesting. She was very introverted and self-conscious. She had some like facial reconstruction and things like that. And it was hard. I was like, I don't know how people are going to work or go to college or have a relationship, or I don't know. It's really, there's a lot to consider that we don't have, we have our faculties. And so whatever we can do to get that intervention in as early as possible. But again, we, as like I was trying to say earlier, that we as adults, we need to just keep going down that rabbit hole, because if we expect the child to be insightful and have the words for it, it's not going to happen. We can't say, and even I can tell you, Peyton still struggles with words. Like, he's got all the words, he's very hyperlexic, but like putting the right word on certain situations, he's now saying, he's been coming up with teenager words, right? I even taught him teenage angsty stuff. He's like, well, angsty sounds like angry. I was like, yeah. And what else are you feeling? Mad, sad, glad? I was like, yeah, that's teenage angst, right? And so now it's everything. Angst. I'm feeling angsty. No, I think this one's hangry. So I'm trying to, but this is 14-year-old. How do you get a 4-year-old to be that specific in their language? It's not going to happen. So you have to bring it down to their level and check them out at different times of day and different environments and see what's the consistent level, and even try to do maybe those PECs, mad, sad, glad. Even today, Peyton, he had a therapy session at home, and I'm not at home, but his therapist is like, no, I'm going to bring emotion cards. I was like, that's all you got. I mean, at 14, we're still using PECs, and that's how you have to do it.
I don't know if you default to I'm 14, because like at dinner time, I'll ask all of my kids, and I have a 23-year-old and a 19, like, how are you feeling? What's going on? I mean, forever, my husband in the morning, how do you feel? Like, I think we always just self-check the ones we love. Like,
yeah, we call it roses and thorns at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah.
Good stuff, bad stuff,
yeah.
Good stuff, bad stuff, learning and not yet, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard, but how do you get a 4-year-old to be there with you? By the way, I tell people I started this with him when he was 4, and I'm still get like, it's still maybe.
And then how do you do that with somebody who doesn't see? No. And so then you've been able to like, what does an emotion look like? I don't know. I've never seen one. I've only felt it.
Look under the low vision, the thing that I put in the module from the Tommy Edison experience, because he's a older man, but he's been blind his whole life versus being, blinded halfway through. And he goes into like, how do I use money? Mm-hmm. Do I get ripped off? Yes, I do. How do you people keep colors different? You're telling me that blue is like water, but blue is like the sky. Like he's like, man, that's confusing. Like, you guys have to deal with that. I don't have to deal with that. So there's a lot of different things that people have learned how to adapt and accommodate themselves. And then there's a lot of things in our environment that help, but we still have a ways to go. I like keeping the idea of accommodations and modifications in your back of your head, but knowing that that's going to be different for everybody at every age and every situation.
And I think too, a huge part of our field, and I forget it until you just said accommodations, but a huge part of our field is creativity. And what that brings to, especially your low incident population, the adaptation and the creativity in that adaptation, that's it. It's a huge part of who we are and what we do. It doesn't ever look the same. Every day never looks the same. I'm just going back to the amplification system. If the person is really struggling that day, you have the amplification system on. If that person's more in tune and the hearings and there's less wind, or I don't know, there's less people, you're not using the amplification. Like, the level of creativity and patience and understanding,
flexibility.
Yes, it's a lot. it's a lot.
You're constantly upshifting, downshifting, and switching. You're like, it's a lot. It takes a lot of energy too, by the way. And so again, with these last 3 chapters, the level of education that it takes to be a teacher of these children is a big deal. And then again, I think I put that in the module too, that there's like graduate students. Hi, I'm a graduate student, blah, 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 and I really want to work with it. You're like, wow, there's certain programs in certain schools in certain states that really literally are like prepping you as a teacher for this type of child. And still, even though you have all the word, you have all the classes, and you have all the degrees, you're in the moment. You got to just like flip the script, and you got to, I remember working, I'm telling you, I've worked with multiple kids who were either deaf, hard of hearing, or had 2 cochlear implants and had no functional communication. So there was a lot of touching involved, a lot of eye contact involved. I also worked with a girl who had 2 cochlear implants and glasses. Like she was, fairly legally blind, and she would just break her glasses because she didn't want to wear. She's a teenager. So it was this.
Put the masks on now. And now we've there's another bout, I mean, it's a maze we are all in every day.
It is. It is.
A maze.
Yeah. And so I just tell people, if it's placed on your heart to work with students like this, let's talk further. Again, this is just an intro class, and we're just kind of like showing you like the first blush. But once you, again, this is almost like a buffet of like options. This class is like, and then if you go, oh, I'm interested in that, or I'm interested in that, or that's really cool, like you start going down the rabbit hole a little bit more on that one. But every once in a while I'll get somebody who's like, I didn't know I could be a teacher in a hospital. That sounds amazing. I'm like, awesome. Or I want to work with the kids who are deaf and blind.
Right.
Let's next chapter. But it's like, wow, like, so we all have our place in this universe. And again, nobody's on plan A, so just keep going. And I do firmly believe your vibe attracts your tribe. You've probably seen it at your work, Cece, where certain kids just like magnetize to you. Right, you're giggling at me. Who's your all of them?
Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But then that means that you are very accepting of all. That's huge. It's also very reinforcing for you that you're in the right place.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was hard at first because they had to get used to me when I first started. But then, like, I think because I have a younger sister that's in that range, I know how to talk to kids other than some teachers that are there that may not have been around kids at all. And then if they get mad at me, and I was like, well, I can be mad too, or I like make a joke out of it. And then that's how they act it, or you like want to be by me, or ask me questions, stuff like that. So
that skill right there, it just I don't know how to explain this. At least you can help me with this. This piece of like, I almost call it like human neutrality, is accepting a person, especially a child with a disability. I call it the, in math, when we would do the absolute value, we'd have these long brackets. That is who they are. That is who you are. That is who they are in the moment. That is who you are in the moment. It's just being and not putting your stuff on them, and they're not putting their stuff on you. And you're just like, I see who you are. You got all your stuff. I got all my stuff. That is a massive skill. Like, and you already mentioned it, Cece, that a lot of teachers don't have it. And so, that is lovely that you can take that with you. What do you call that, Alicia? Like, it's to me,
I just, in my head, I see it a rightness of fit, which is probably to education, but I agree with you, Cece. I see it more when it doesn't happen than when it does. And I wish that those teachers could see what they don't have when they look and see other adults connecting to kids. And the reason why the adults are connecting to the kids are because those adults realize that those kids have value instantly. Mm-hmm. And then the kids recognize that. Like, this is an unspoken relationship. It's like animalistic. It's like, they're like, it's just this thing. But when an adult doesn't have it,
it's obvious.
Wow. You just stand back and go, we think a different field might be a nice idea.
Absolutely. And it's weird because there's one in all of our histories too, like that teacher that who did not want to be there.
Right.
Right. or your favorite teacher who like was super erratic. It was just in their blood, in their bones, right? And it's like, yeah, it's interesting how some people do go into the field and you're like, what were you, what? No,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, you're like the lady who is the front secretary at Peyton's first school was like the Maxine on the Hallmark cards, the lady
Oh,
with
how
the white
funny. Oh,
hair.
she make me laugh so hard.
Right?
Oh,
But that's Maxine. You expect her to be like shuffling towards a bus stop or standing in front of you at
crouching.
CVS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Not
Yeah.
at the front at an elementary school.
No. No.
You're like,
Yeah.
and then she ended up retiring, which is perfect because we're like, okay, so now Maxine is at CVS or shuffling to those. We get it. But there's a piece where it's like, there's this thing where like, oh, and I've run into it too, where I've had teachers who have the biggest heart and the most patience for my kid. Oh, Molly. Wow. Like, yay, Molly. She's like, I'm coming. And I've seen teachers who ain't having it. And I get both of those things. So let's do now that Molly's here, let's do a Q&A maybe. Let's just leave it open and she can always go back and watch the video. Molly. So great to see you.
Hello.
Even though it's like way down the rabbit hole of the class. We are almost wrapping it up, but we'd love to have a moment where we could ask some questions, do it like an open forum, because you can always go back and watch the video. Right?
Yes. Sorry, I'm driving. I had another assignment I had to go do today, so I'm trying to log on, and I was hoping to catch some, but
Hey, no,
yeah.
you're here. We're here for you. It's like we could do like another 10 minutes. It's not even 8. We've gone to 9 before. Come on. Like, Alicia, do you want to jump in?
Okay, tell me. I'm sorry. I saw somebody
You
email.
had your hand raised. I was like, oh,
No.
So wait, let's start like a little bit at the beginning. Molly, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm just a little stressed.
Oh, are you minimizing just for us? Because we're like a lot stressed. So
Yes.
we already had that part.
I'm pretty stressed.
Oh, don't hide that from us, honey, because we get it. We get it. Where everybody's at like the stage right now. Everyone's at the stage. That's why we wanted to roll out like the last 2 weeks now, so you guys could like pick and choose your battles, right?
Yeah.
So we do have one more lecture, but like the 12, 13, 14 are out. You guys can tackle them as you go, right? Just remember, Sunday the 12th at midnight cuts you off. And remember, Canvas gets a little fussy at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You guys know this, right? Like the tech gets a little, or your computer or whatever, and then you're like, I waited to the last minute. Why? Please don't wait till the last minute. But you guys are doing well.
These 2 students are not.
Yeah.
And chapter
I'm not worried
14
about it. I just wanted to get that on the recording for everybody. Like, it's like we're all doing what we can do. So we want to give you guys the amount of time that you need and the support you need. Ask us anything at any time. We're here for you. We just wanted to make sure that we're do the best that you can in every moment. And sometimes you're doing great and sometimes you're not. Trust me, literally right before we started this class, my girlfriend called me. I mean, DEFCON 12. She was like, I was like, I will call you back. We are all right there. We are all right there. I'm telling you, all right, my kid's off the rocker. Alicia's like, what's happening? I was like, I have other professors calling me. What is going? I was like, we got to, we got it. We get this. So our goal here is to, again, be here, like give you guys the scope. Cause again, no final in the class, just an extra test, just a regular unit test. But just keep getting in your work in. There's no points penalty for being late. Just, pick your battles and don't like kill yourself to do it because nobody needs 100% in this class. Nobody. Okay. So if you get like a 92 or 91 or an 89.5, it's still an A, and a 79.5 is a B, and a 69.5 is a C. So I've had students who took my classes who were like AA students this semester, last semester was like, what do I need for a C? It's like, fair. Because life is still what life is. Life is still what life is. And nobody's going to say, oh, well, you got to see an intro to special needs. So you can't work with my kid. Nobody will ask you. Ever. Never.
But we need A's to stay on the honor society.
Well, that's something different. But listen, we don't need honor society teachers. We need teachers who are authentic and willing to do the work.
Yeah.
That's it. right? You don't have to
Yeah.
be perfect
Sure.
to be a good teacher, right? Good.
Yeah. Also, the module 14 is not showing on my
Oh.
side.
And
Same.
Okay, I'm going in right now.
Just going in. But Molly,
Not that
what do you
not
have?
that
What do
I'm
you
there
have?
yet, but
No. But thanks for telling us, because I know things happen. Trust me on this one. Things
Yeah.
happen. And also,
yeah.
do you
Sorry.
have questions about the deaf community or the hard of here, the deaf community or the low vision and blindness community?
Not really. I honestly haven't even like looked there.
That's
yet,
fair. That's
so
fair.
I don't.
That's fair. Well, hopefully in our video, we covered a lot of stuff. We didn't go through the PowerPoint. So if you go through the video, it's kind of an overview of both of them, because they do share a lot of some things in common and being low incidence. And they also take a highly specialized teacher, but they
Mhm.
also both have such an identity as a community, especially the deaf community. And then both of these chapters really talk about the accommodations and modifications. And so what we can do as professionals with kids who have very unique needs that are very rare. But again, if you want to work in this community, there's a lot of things to do,
Yeah.
a lot of ways to go. So if you don't have questions, that's fine. I would just say watch the video when you can.
Yeah.
And then Alicia, what did you see about the module?
It was not, so it's loaded now. I just pushed it out.
Cool. Thank you.
You're the worst. Let me
Wait,
tell you what
so
my son
this-
would say. You're the worst.
So tonight was both of those chapters together, right? Okay.
Yes.
We actually have a child who is cross-eyed in our class. So yet again, I have another.
Strabismus.
Yes, and he's the poor kid. Like, he just got his glasses, which he was reluctant to wear at first, and now he's wearing them. But he's like 2 weeks ago went home throwing up, and yesterday, or he threw up all over me the other day. My boss had to buy me new pants because I was just all everywhere, and we think that it could be, well, we think that it's from his glasses. We think they're just, I don't know, too strong, or he's not, because there's nothing else that, it's not like he's sick. There's nothing else going on. He gets extremely tired. And then yesterday he went home because it seemed like he was having an anxiety attack. And then next thing you know, he started throwing up. So.
Can I ask, Molly, are you just putting the glasses on him? And then what are you doing?
No, the mom puts them on him in the morning, or I think he wears them like all the time now. Like, he doesn't seem to want to take them off. So I know I think he knows that they're helping, but as far as I know, they're on all the time. That's
I would maybe
basically
recommend some more activity, some more like an obstacle course where he's got to use his eyes in different formats, so that his brain and eyes start to use. You want muscle memory. And so you just have to increase the amount of times that he's using it, as opposed to a resistance with the glasses. So like things like obstacle courses and movement, ups and downs.
Simon says
those kinds of things that might help with the vomiting. That's rough.
I know since he's been wearing them, like, we haven't even been able to get to that point, because literally he's so tired that he like falls asleep in class. And then just yesterday he started like the throwing up at school. At home he did, but he has a twin brother, and his twin also was throwing up like a couple weeks ago. So we assumed he just was sick. And but then this week he's not. He just gets so tired, and then he also has separation anxiety a little bit from his mom, and then he missed a lot of school, but his twin was coming to school, so he feels that separation there. But he's not even like, he doesn't even have the energy to play. It's really sad. He's had to go home the last couple days.
Can I ask one question?
Mm-hmm.
Is he dizzy? Does he complain about being dizzy, or do you guys try to assess using those words, or try?
Yeah,
because sometimes the ears.
I tried. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, and Alicia, you were nodding. Like, it's not just the eyes. Sometimes the ears and the eyes together.
He sounds sick. I hate to tell you, he sounds sick. I think he needs to go back to the doctor. Yeah, he might have an ear infection. He might have something that just went into something else. The other thing you might want to test, pediatric COVID, because they get really, really tired. Yeah, so he sounds sick. He does that. Yeah, especially if his brother was sick 2 weeks ago. His brother's vomiting, he's vomiting.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, he's got glasses too. Like it just sounds like it's just the timing is off. And this poor mom is in Christmas mode and has no time for sickness, none whatsoever.
Like,
I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
It's not fun. Yeah, and again, I like how you're trying to like assess, you're trying to like dig down, but like, yeah, there's a lot of variables on the plate. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. And by the way, yeah, you start to, after the second or third pair of pants, you just keep an extra pair of pants and a couple of
Oh my
shirts.
gosh, I know. That's what everybody said. I was gonna come home and my fiance was out surfing, so I couldn't call him to bring them. And then there was no point. It was faster to go to Target than it was to go home. So I just thought those are gonna be my school pants now.
I just was looking
Those
in
are
my
first.
car, like where the trunk it, like I've learned this over the years. Like sometimes I want my trunk empty, so I open the bottom thing where the spare tire is, and I like hide stuff in there. And sure enough, I had like pants. It's like,
Oh my God.
and my car is only like, you know, I buy it pre-owned, but it's only like 2 or 3 years, and that's because I have a Peyton. You know, the shirt. I mean, I've been out to lunch and destroyed a shirt, so I can't even blame him either. It's me. So there's this thing where I'm like, oh God, I have like 3 outfits. And you just, it's just a skill that you build as you go. And then here's another thing for people who wear glasses, have a spare. I've had a child break my glasses on my face. So you're like, oh, and I don't necessarily travel with a spare, but I have to at least in my head go, do I have it? Like there's a thing, even if they're old, like there's a thing. Yeah. So we learn about that. So yeah, keep us informed, and yeah, go back and watch the video. Again, these 2 chapters, they're very different, but there's a lot of similarities. And then hopefully we were able to answer those questions going through. And then looking forward to next week, we have chapter 14, which is kind of, in a way, it's a catch-all, but it's more the most rare, most rare. And it's deaf and blind, so children who can't hear or see, which I'm like blown away, and TBI, and I think a couple of other little very rare things there. So TBI is one of these ones where you could even have a gifted kid who has a brain injury and then comes back and is in, you know, learning how to walk and talk again. So TBI is one of those things that I think we've all been through. You know, we all went to high school and we had that one, you know, car wreck of these people at that certain, you know, spring break or whatever. And then like, oh, they were this way, now they're this way. Yeah. Watch all the videos, all those extra videos that I've curated in the modules. There's a ton of information. And keep it coming. When you guys do your reflections, your extra stuff in there is awesome too. So thank you.
Yes, Cece.
Sorry.
No, it's me. That's me.
I do have 2 questions. For the low vision, does it sometimes get misdiagnosed if they have like dyslexia, or if they say like, oh, they just have dyslexia, but then later along the line, it might be something more, you know, serious?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's so much easier to put glasses on.
Yes.
So it's even like, if say for instance, if they need an IEP, is that labeled on there? And then if they do a misdiagnosis, do they have to go back to the IEP and like change what's in the assessment? Or
every good IEP clears hearing and vision first. So that's the easiest, it's the easiest thing. So even in an IFSP, which is down from 0 to 3, you clear hearing and vision first, always. The problem is that when the vision is more elusive, it's difficult, it's not as easy, or you have a nonverbal person, that it would be harder. But so the IEP would state on it any vision issues. It should. Now, if you found out after you had an open IEP, yes, go back to the drawing board and have another IEP.
So like, for example, you could have a young child whose vision seems okay, and they aren't showing any signs of any vision issues or the gait issues or the hesitancy or anything like that we've talked about before. And, you know, they were on an IFSP for maybe something like, you know, autism or something else, right? Then they start to get into the academic, right? So now they're in an IEP because now they're in kindergarten. That's an IEP. Let's say they have really bad asthma. right? And that was identified at birth, and you just keep an eye on it, or they have like a severe allergies, and then now we're in the IEP zone because they're a little bit older, right? And now they're struggling with the academics, right? So again, on the triennial, the first thing they do is eyes and ears, right? And so maybe at that point, now again, remember, kids are spending more time in front of screens, and kids' eyes are like deteriorating quicker than ever, right? So now you have like a 6-year-old whose eyes might be different than they were when they were 3, right? For several reasons, right? Again, we've talked about maybe we missed it first, and maybe it's screen time. Maybe there could be something like a tumor, like an actual medical. So there's a bunch of things that could happen. Now, again, in the academic environment, they're like, well, this child's not writing their name, or they're writing their B's backwards. And so we have a couple of little flags in our head. Like, oh, could be dyslexia. It could be poor vision and dyslexia. But the dyslexia didn't really show up until we were sitting writing our letters. Right? So if you're asking, could it be? Yeah, it could absolutely be the vision. And dyslexia is not just a vision thing. It's like a translation error in the brain as well, but it does start with vision. If you have clear vision and you still have dyslexia, that's a challenge. If you have poor vision and dyslexia, that's a bigger challenge. So yeah, we always want to keep up on where we're at. It's like you and me. If we need glasses and we're not wearing glasses, how much are we struggling through the day? Well, maybe a little bit, but maybe a lot, and we're just pretending. Now, again, are we sitting in a classroom like a 3rd grader? No. How is that affecting a 3rd grader? A lot more than it would affect us. So again, with the parents, just get them on the team, get them on your side, be that collaborative team. Is like, when's the last time you saw a doctor? Just keep it nice and loose, right? Do they do the eye check? When do they do the eye check at your doctors? Oh, I don't know. Well, you know what? When's the next time you're seeing the doctor? Can we possibly work that in? And so again, and this is, I literally give parents a green light. Tell them I'm noticing at school. Tell them we are seeing X, Y, and Z. Tell them that I'm complaining about it. Blame me, right? I always give them that one, like, blame it all on me, because if you tell them I'm hysterical, but it's causing problems at school, they need to address it. Yeah. So there's this piece where sometimes parents, I think there's a cultural piece where parents have been taught that a doctor is like on a pedestal, and you don't ever question a doctor, and you don't even ask a doctor. You don't ask, like, even the lady who was doing my facial last month, she goes, oh, my favorite clients are the clients who never ask me for anything, meaning like they never place demands on me. And she's of a culture where that's disrespectful to say, hey, no, I need a little bit more salt in here. Like, you never do that, right? So there is a cultural piece when parents are talking to doctors. And so you can, hey, put me in the front lines. If you think you're being disrespectful to the doctor, blame me. Tell them that I said it. You didn't say it. I said it, right? Sometimes you have to play that team game. And so there's a lot going on, because you're not at home with the child. You're not in the doctor's office with the family. There's a little bit of a thing there that it's like, I don't know. How would you say that, Alicia?
I think all of us in general, if your doctor tells you don't have cancer, you're like, hey man, I don't have cancer, but yet I'm still sleeping 85 hours a day. Your doctor's wrong. Like,
something's going on.
So we all feel that. The doctors give us peace of mind, or they don't. And yeah, we all have that. Yeah.
No, I've had a doctor yell at me regarding my child. Like, you should do what I say. I'm like, well, I don't agree with that. We're going to get a second opinion, but I'm this and I'm that. I'm like, that's okay. I have the right to a second opinion. Yeah. So there's things like, there's a process, and and here's a cool thing is when you get you get the glasses on the kid, or you put them up at the front of the class so they can hear. But this blossoming that you happen when you find that sweet spot of that intervention, and you're like, oh, that's or something like it could be that their hearing is fine, but like when there's a high pitch, it's lost, or when there's a low pitch, it's sensory troubling for them. So their hearing is fine, like in the middle. Look at the audiograms in the book, but sometimes there's a high pitch and a low pitch that will send a child into like a sensory spin. And it's not that they have autism. They might have just Like for me, it's kind of like someone playing DJ driving down the street. When it's that super duper low bass, it like makes my teeth rattle and I get really dysregulated really quickly. I get like angry. Yeah. And I'm thinking, I don't have autism that we know of. So what if a kid is having to deal with, or like there's a high pitch or a sound, or like even like a certain instruments, like it could just be the wrong pitch that just kind of drills in. So sometimes it's just getting a device or something that either muffles that or amplifies it. It's really hard to find that sweet spot. You just got to keep going. Yeah.
That's a great question, Cece. It does. You clear it on the IEP first. Anything medical, you always default to medical first.
It's like going into your car and putting the key in and turning it and it doesn't start. You say, oh my God, I need a new engine. That's like thousands of dollars, right? Or do you go, holy crap, I'm out of gas. Or, oh, I left the dome light on. I have no battery. Would you go ahead and just replace the entire engine or fill the tank and replace the battery? You do the least amount of intervention first to get your greatest response instead of like going for the big piece. No. Let's go for the easy one, right? Right. It's almost like trying to shut a cupboard door. You're like, why is this not shutting all the way? Oh, there's a can in the way. Well, I better take this whole door off and sand it down and do no, just move the can. Like shut the door. Like, so we try to do the easiest fix first that gives us the greatest results. Right. And sometimes it's not the ears and the eyes, right? And then we got to keep going. But if it is the ears and the eyes, why would you go any further?
Right.
It's that same adage of somebody saying, oh, I lost my keys. And somebody says, well, where's the last place you had? Or I found them in the last place I had them. Well, yeah, because you stopped looking. You don't keep looking once you found it. You found the solution to your problem. You don't keep searching for your keys. You found them. So there's a piece where just start with the easiest piece, and the eyes and the ears actually really are the root of a lot of different things. And again, our medical stuff really puts that basis down for a lot of our coping in the environment as well. So again, if a child can't breathe because they have asthma, right? We get an inhaler in there, and then guess what? They can breathe because normally they'd be sitting in a chair wheezing and they're distracted and they're like a little bit blue, and you're like, the child can't learn if they can't breathe, right? We learn the same thing with food insecurity. A child cannot learn if they didn't eat breakfast, so we give them free reduced breakfast, right? So there's this piece where we're trying to put these variables, these smaller variables in, cover these bases so you can get the greatest return. You don't do the big stuff and then hope for littlest return. Little interventions give you the greatest return. Yeah, it's just, you guys will get it as you keep going in your field.
My last question, I know some children who have like autism, some of their parents have them wear like a lanyard that says like, I'm autistic, or and then it has like their emergency stuff. So do you see that often in other categories, or is it more, I mean, it's like their choice, of course, but do you ever see that with like deaf and low vision or anything?
Well, I think in general, you tend to see it, first of all, in the nonverbal, probably comorbidities, probably mobile, and so not non-ambulatory, and older. So in the younger population, your 4-year-old can get lost anyways. So that's like, so you wouldn't necessarily put an identifying marker on your child at 4 because your typical like 4-year-old is running around. You're trying to control them anyways. However, at 14, that's a different issue. So I have seen it at 14 with, I would say, comorbidities, the mobile kids, the ones that will run, the ones that will try to get away, escape, that are elope, that are orientated toward escape. I have seen it in many different fashions, not just the necklace. I've seen it on arms. I've seen it in tags on clothes. Mm-hmm. That's rarely where I've seen it more. I've seen it on bracelets, anklets, so I've seen it in a lot of different areas, and I've even seen like more like if you're non-verbal, to have like a little identification, like, hi, my name is Samantha and I'm 6 years old and my mommy's number is this, those kinds of factors. So you're looking at more of a safety issue and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and again, that's a parent choice, because some parents are out there about it, and some parents are totally great about it. Some parents are just like, shh, 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 don't. And it's so that's all preference. I've seen it both ways. It's really kind of interesting, because some parents I've been at a grocery store where the kids started having a behavior, and the mom started handing out business cards to everybody that said, it's okay, this is normal. And it was like this interesting little piece that, I mean, the child was just reacting as a child reacts, right? It doesn't matter how old they are or what impairments they have, but the mom was trying to like, it's interesting. And I've had people say things to me, your child's out of control. I'm like, yep. That's the diagnostic criteria for this child. Yes. It says out of control disorder, whatever.
I think, Cece, I mean, obviously you want to keep your child safe. That's the most important thing. And you want to keep them near you. You're the safest person. God forbid they get picked up by another crazy human, right? That's not where a mom's mind is by any stretch of the imagination. So you want to keep them safe. The other thing is that you want to put them in environments that will be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hardest thing. I tell parents, especially the older the children are, if they're nonverbal, you want to tell your neighbors, because it's safer. And that's your community. If your child does escape, then the neighbor that sees the kid bolting down, wouldn't you rather that neighbor? I would go get that kid. I would be the one to be like, okay, what can we do? It's the same thing as if you see the neighbor's dog running down the street. Don't you want to go grab the dog? You go get the treats. It's the same kind of thing. So when you are in the grocery store and your child is acting up, you let's move on. Help the mom, move something aside and move on. Be that community. I think that's what you want to be, that safe community that this mom has put this child into, or this parent, this father, because it does come down to safety. That's really for me and for you. I mean, in the end, it's really just about keeping everybody safe.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I have written letters and blanketed my neighborhood, and it wasn't that, my child has autism. It's like, my child's extremely friendly. Mm-hmm. And the rule is he is not allowed in anyone's house without me present. And don't give him toys and don't give him stuff out of your garage sale unless there's an adult with him. And he's mad at me still to this day. Trust me, this was a 6-year-old child who pulled over an entire shopping cart at Trader Joe's, pulled it all the way over, a 6-year-old, and he was 40 pounds. And they weren't mad, but you could see why that kid did that. I was like, and yeah, broken jars and the just like, yeah, this is how it works. But it's almost the same thing as the parent choice of, you've seen the kids with the backpack that looks like a teddy bear and there's like a leash on it. Mm-hmm. It's hard. That's a hard one for me, but I figure like every parent has their choice. And here's the bottom line: kids are cute and kids get stolen. Mm-hmm. So it's like,
and there are kids that run away. And, I have to agree with you, Mary. When I was younger and see those kids, I was mortified. Like, they're not monkeys. They are not, you can put whatever cute stuffed animal you want on that thing. It's not a cage. However, that being said, I then got a client who was one of 4, and the mom, he just bolted all the time. Yeah. And she's taking other kids to soccer fields. She couldn't keep him, like, she could not manage it.
There's a point where your child can outrun you.
Right.
And then they're on the street and you literally can't run that fast.
Right.
And so it's this piece where I'm like, you know what? Our sanity comes in every shape and form now.
And their safety does. And it's hard. I always tell, and it's funny, you'll get questions from parents often too, kind of in the same format, Cece, that you asked, like, should I say something to the parent about, or I'm sorry, should I say something to the teacher about some struggles we've had? Or should I? It's the same thing as wearing kind of the, like, kind of wearing anything. And I don't know if I come at it from a teacher's perspective of like, I can't help unless I know. The same thing with my neighbors. I'm much more up to help as opposed to like close my door and pretend nothing's happening, but I can't help unless I know. And so it's really how you approach it.
I actually had a neighbor come over one time, and she was maybe about 10 houses away around the corner, and she was a little bit in a huff. And my kid, you know, children with ADHD or autism can be very incessant. And she had her garage open, and there was like a bunch of like RC cars or models or in a box or something. And my child has learned over the course of his life that he can ask for stuff. There's nothing wrong with asking for it. The problem is he's gotten a yes to a lot of things. So he's the kid who sees stuff in your garage. He's like, hey, can I have that? And for you and I are like, that's super socially awkward. I would never do that.
Right.
For him, he's like, oh, I've gotten a yes to that a bunch of times. So she came over to me and she was like, he keeps asking me for this thing and this. And I'm like, well, yeah, you know, a lot of times he gets very, fixated on stuff, and, people have been very generous to him, and, and so his autism has these limitations. She goes, oh, there's something wrong with him. I was like, no, no, but he's going to ask you, even though you tell him 30 times, he's still going to probably ask you. So just don't open your garage, or if he comes by, just say, Peyton, we've already talked about this. So there's a piece where like people kind of like, she didn't know. The second she knew, she backed off. I was like, good.
And see though, but then that builds up like resistance from other families too, unfortunately. So I would say don't be that person.
That's hard. Yeah. And it was funny because then at the same time, another neighbor's walking up and she's like, oh, that lady. I was like, oh, you're on that other side. She's like, oh yeah, she's the one. There's always one, right? There's always one on your street or in your complex or whatever. We have one on each side. It's hilarious. So you're like, oh, that's yours. So this one's ours.
Right.
The one who like is so mortified about everything, and your dog's out, your cans are out too long or whatever. You're like, oh, whatever. So that's the whole situation. So you can't control for that variable when somebody's ignorant or says the wrong thing or whatever. You just do your thing, and it's hard
in the world, and we're always just trying to keep them safe.
Yeah,
always.
Yeah, and that is a huge clue. I would love to talk about that more with all the chapters. That is something that we taught Peyton. I was like, even when he doesn't understand how the world is, we just say, my job, my only job on this planet, my first job is safety. That whatever that is that you're arguing with me about, that's not safe. That is not a safe choice. That's not a safe idea. That's not a safe thing to do. Oh, you wanted to go around the corner and talk to the neighbor, but you didn't have your bike helmet on and you crashed. Oh, wasn't safe. Like we talked about. So there's a bunch of different things to go. It's safety, 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 safety. Even the crisis counselors at school were like safety, 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 safety. So yeah. So always.
Cece.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Very good. Very astute.
Out of the ballpark. Nice job.
So what else do we have? I think we covered a lot of bases, and again, I really just want to send all like my like white light and energy to everybody and goodness to like, hey, we can do this. We can get through this. This is not the end of the world. This is one semester, one class. Struggles are how, we learn in life. And this is, you guys are.
So our last class is next week.
Next week. Yeah.
Holy cow. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's been so fun. I've had such a great time.
So great. So great. And so my last 2 cents is if you have questions about what to register for next semester, just let us know. We do have the academic counselors. Everybody has an ed plan. I know the spring semester is already in WebAdvisor. I know it's a little tough to like register for classes right now, but people are like, ooh, let me wait until the spring semester. I can tell you right now, if you wait too long, we cancel classes. So as soon as you can register for the classes that you need, please do. That's like my last 2 cents. Oh, and I hate it when we have like 10 people in the class, we need 20. And then, you're waiting for this one class because it's amazing, or you need it for a certificate, and then we have to cancel it. It's hard. It's hard. But lovely as ever to spend the time with you ladies. And if you guys need anything at any time, reach out. You guys have been very good. And open and allowing us in your lives and answering questions. And you guys are amazing. This is an amazing class. It's like for us, again, it's very advanced. You guys are already in the field. You ask these very deep, astute, pointed questions that are like, shows us that you are really thinking about, you're not the mindless teacher. You're the teacher who's really trying to get in there and try to understand. And that's what's going to make a difference in society, in our lives, in the future. Just that one pivotal moment is all we can do on any given day, any given time. So do your best. Yeah. Okay, good. Any other questions?
Guys.
We will see you next week. But again, hang in there. We got your back. We're here for you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.